we've contractors in weed control and all sorts of biosecurity and biodiversity projects. So wetlands is something we've got involved in more recently. We also do a lot of work on willow control in braided rivers. So I guess the first question we ask when we look at wetland projects is like, what do we got? What's the stock take? What do we actually got on site? What's the biodiversity values and what are we trying to protect there? And then once we've got a good idea of what's on the site that we're protecting, then we look at what are the impediments that are stopping that site from rehabilitating. So what do we actually need to get rid of? So one of the big things for us is like looking at a list of priorities and seeing what can we actually achieve with potential funding. Is there sufficient funding? And are we going to be able to get it over the line? So with the methodologies for weed control, nothing's actually rocket science. There's only a few, there's limited ways you can kill stuff. We can get pretty creative. A lot of the work we do is on willow control, and a lot of that's just around, basically hand tool type work, doing basic on the ground, big crews of people and covering country. So the thing that I first look at when I go to a wetland is there any grey willow? Because like grey willow is like a two-edged sword, I think. It's got both a seeding component and a vegetative component, and that's a real problem because it's sort of like a double exacerbator as a weed contributor. And then you crack willow, big crack willow there, so that's gonna, next time there's a big northwest wind, branches are going to end up in the wetland and then they're going to vegetatively reproduce. So they're sort of some of the low-hanging fruit that we want to capture and get rid of in the first instance. And obviously we're talking with the client, the landholder and Environment Canterbury or whoever the funding base is as to what their priorities are. So timing's quite a critical aspect for us. Like some weeds take different things, as in chemicals, differently. We've got to get chemicals to be able to translocate through the conductive tissue of the weed. So if we're talking about willow, generally we can kill willow, most of the willow species, all year round. And what we do is we use what we call drill and fill. So nothing's too rocket science. If you want to look at the drill and fill methodology, go onto the MPI website for wilding conifers and have a look at how they do drill and fill for killing wilding pines. It's exactly the same methodology we use for willow control. And effectively we're using a 16mm drill bit, an auger, diagonally drilling a hole across the cambium around the entire circumference of the base of the tree above the waterline. And the reason we diagonally drill them is because we've got to cross all of the conductive tissue because it's going to translocate vertically. So, and then once we've drilled those holes, we're injecting glyphosate, and we've looked at a few different options there. We're actually trying to turn down the quantity of herbicide being used, trying to lessen the impact there, and obviously the cost, because herbicide's a pretty big cost. It can be a big component of the project. So
in View Wetland, there's several big trees that have either fallen over or been knocked over or whatever, but each of them unfortunately is sprouting at the points. See some roots in there sprouting at the points where it's touching the water. So that becomes very problematic in terms of drilling and filling, taking up to almost a couple of hours per tree.
We're using drench guns. It's pretty simple stuff. I think I'm probably the biggest purchaser of drench guns in Canterbury at the moment. We do a lot of what we call cut and paste. So you can cut the vegetation off and then just put a herbicide paste on the cut stump, and that's problematic because when you cut the stump, if you're in a wetland area with standing water, any of that cut material falls in the water, obviously we've got a problem again. So you could actually be exacerbating the problem by doing weed control. You've got to think really, really hard about that. I mean, one of the ways you can deal with that is that you can cut it high and then remove the cut material onto a dry area. But I was just talking to Simon and he was saying some of the work that they did, they cut some stuff and laid it up to dry, and of course 3 weeks later the water level rose and it wasn't the best outcome.